What's up, y'all? It's Zach with Living Corporate, and wow, hey, look, I ain't gonna hold y'all. Past couple weeks have been different. Hurricane Beryl, for those who haven't been watching the news, was a storm, Category 1 hurricane that came through Houston and really caught everybody off guard, and yet caught nobody off guard. It caught everybody off guard in that nobody expected for it to do the damage that it did. At the same time, it caught nobody off guard because Houston notoriously struggles and has continued to struggle with storms. From an infrastructure perspective, we're just not in a place to handle storms. It's almost as if leaders in our state are more concerned with making money than keeping people safe, as if there's some type of binary choice between sustainability and profitability. And we pay for it. I want to certainly send my condolences for the folks in our city in Houston whose families were impacted by the storm, whose lives were lost, right? And for us, right, like beyond like the personal impact of just the storm and okay, wow, look at my city, look at the damage, look at these neighborhoods. We were without power, y'all. Like Living Corporate, we were without power for a week. So we were delayed last week, and then, we were delayed this week too, right? Just because the storm knocked out power and internet for over a week. We're just now getting back in the swing of things. We had a bunch of conversations, interviews scheduled to record. I'm giving you a little bit of behind the scenes, but had a lot of content that we were prepared to record, and we had to obviously cancel all those all those events because we didn't have no power, right? We had no internet. So, we're here though. It's interesting. I'm doing kind of like a different thing this week because the first time truly in like the 6 years of Living Corporate being around, we're going to do a bit of a replay because I want to go back. Like I want to refeature one of our old past conversations that you would have to go on our website or subscribe, pay for to get because it's archived now. But it's a conversation we had with Kamau Bell about a book he was writing at the time, that he had written at the time and published at the time, called Do the Work. Really about like DEI strategy and then broader than that, really about like how does this work exist within corporate America. Really good conversation. And it was pretty punchy too. So I really enjoyed our discussion. I hope y'all do too. And we'll get to that later. I wanted to, though, pause and kind of look at the state of things, right? That's why the name of this pod is The State of Things. A couple realities. I'm recording this the week after I'm going to say, for lack of a better words, kerfuffle at Trump's rally. And y'all know that like Living Corporate isn't really like a quote unquote political podcast. We make points related to systems that have political implications. Yes, we may interview elected officials, but we're typically talking about the intersection of workplace experience and lived experience, employee experience, customer experience. Like we're typically talking about business, right? So typically whatever we're talking about has some business implication. What's interesting here is as I look at the fallout from, again, I'm going to use the word kerfuffle, people are taking really interesting stances, right? So there was like this hot sauce company that decided to like go full tilt in supporting Trump and like emailed all of their customers saying like, hey, we want you to support Trump too. And, we think this is wrong the way he was treated. And, here, buy a t-shirt. It was very strange. We're seeing leaders who represent and are responsible for all sorts of people make like really bold proclamations and points of support for Donald Trump. And it's interesting because I think like the age of empathy, or the season, it's not an age, but the season of empathy for historically marginalized people, it's really real, like of public empathy, right? Because I don't think the empathy was ever real, but public performative empathy, that season is over. And it almost seems to be like a really sharp turn to advocating for, really re-advocating for straight white men, those in the majority, and self-victimization too, to be honest, right? Like, it's very strange. I get concerned when I see organizations, leaders make such public and bold stances in support of people and institutions that have documented histories of harming those on the margins, right? Like, that is concerning. And as I think about what I'm also seeing in the market related to HR jobs being cut, as I'm looking at DEI positions being slashed, as I'm looking at Black and brown folks continuing to be disproportionately impacted by these layoff decisions, my concern is that it's only accelerating, right? It's only really accelerating. We're not even really in full tilt yet. I do believe that this past weekend's incident will help give people the additional, for lack of a better word, courage to do what it is they already were wanting to do. But if you think that these things aren't connected, if you think that your personal politics don't impact how you see the world of work, right, the place where you spend most of your time, you are sadly mistaken. But all the scrutiny around quote unquote DEI isn't necessarily bad. And what I mean by that is that this DEI space has had a lot of fluff for a long time, right? And a lot of folks who had no business really in this work or this space have been able to get away with it, to be honest, right? Like, they don't have any actual bona fides, but they may be from a marginalized community, or they might be really passionate, or they might have a following on social media. So they were able to get a particular job as a director of DEI, or a head of employee diverse experiences, or leader, global head of strategic DEI programs, or whatever the case is, whatever title you want to give, right? Like, they were able to kind of get away with that because there was a season where fluff was just much more allowed. And this is not shade for folks looking to like make sure that they can pay their bills. I do think you have an obligation to like show up well. If you have a job, I do think that job should actually be a value add. I don't think just because you're Black or you're brown that you should just have a BS job, or a job that doesn't really create any impact, especially if the marketing or brand around that job is to actually help other people. So yeah, some of these layoffs, some of these teams, y'all, I ain't gonna hold you. Some of these teams I've been seeing, certain organizations laying off their whole team. Some of them, y'all, I've actually worked with some of them people. Some of them I actually have met on calls or like talked to them, or we've had like different interactions, and I've experienced them up close, and I'm like, yeah, y'all don't really be doing nothing. I'm sorry, right? Because you got to figure out a way to feed your family. So that's not cool. At the same time, I can also say it wasn't cool for you to be in these positions, going to these events, gathering awards, being present at galas, while online spouting about lifting and amplifying marginalized people while you weren't doing any of that work. And there are people who are actively suffering because you were in these positions not doing nothing. Where I believe that this moment is actually really good for quote unquote DEI, workplace experience, employee experience, talent, people strategy is there's going to be an increased scrutiny, a heightened scrutiny for return on investment of people programs, right? It's not going to be enough just to say, hey, we're doing this program so that people can feel more included, and if they feel more included, then they'll be more productive, or, we want to make sure that people feel like they belong because it's just right for everybody to. That moral appeal is fading away, and I like that. I like that because this posturing that altruism is enough to justify 6, 7, 8-figure budgets was never honest, right? Altruism is not enough of a reason in a capitalist system to do anything. And for the longest, DEI, so many times, not all the time, because there are some programs that are very mature, that have very robust analytics teams, But a lot of times, they're not really connecting, hey, here's this program, and here's the impact it's going to have on your customer experience. Here's the impact it's going to have on your employee experience. Here's the dollars that we see that are going to be connected to this, like in a direct way. Most organizations, many organizations, like a large majority of organizations, do not have that degree of thought leadership. And in fact, most of the people in positions over those programs can't even tell you what I just said. They can't even explain to you what I just meant, even though I said it very plainly. So I'm going to say it one more time, Dr. Umar style. I'm not going to say it 3 times. I'm going to say it twice. Most organizations do not have, and have not historically had, the analytics capabilities to take and connect their programs that they are driving around quote unquote DEI or employee experience or employee engagement or even learning and development, and then connect it back to return on investment from a customer experience perspective, return on investment from a operations perspective. Most organizations, their key driver is we should do this just because it's the right thing to do. And over the years, we look up and we get confused and concerned as to why our budgets continue to shrink, our teams continue to shrink, our power continues to shrink, and our chair gets smaller and smaller and smaller at the table until we don't have a chair at the table, a seat at the table no more, right? And so I'm deeply frustrated, right? I don't want to get it twisted. I'm frustrated this season of a bunch of bad actors using DEI as a slur. I'm frustrated this season of people just being much more brazen in their disrespect and their disregard for those on the margins, because it does impact those on the margin, and it impacts employees, right? Like these are real people. When you get laid off, or when leadership that are real advocates in this space are under-resourced, under-sponsored, understaffed, it creates real downstream impact. So that is deeply frustrating. I have to, though, apply some degree of optimism and say, hey, this is like a pruning season for what the future of this work is going to look like. Because the current state of things is bad. Like straight up, the current state of things is so frustrating. You look around, you're like, damn, okay, so y'all are normalizing layoffs. You don't really care about your employee experience. Your job culture is very cyclical at this point. It's seasonal, right? It's every 12 to 18 months. Hell, some of y'all, it's like every quarter. You're making new decisions, changes. It creates ongoing distrust, ever-growing distrust, disengagement. Meanwhile, profits have never been higher. And so you look up and you're just like, okay, well, what are we doing? Like, what is happening? And so for me, I have to look at it and be as objective as possible and say, hey, we're in a season now where we're no longer being cute about what the business is. The business is here to make money at all costs. And so if you're going to be in this business, being just corporate America, you're going to have to really drive and connect your work back to ultimate value. And it can't be something that is squishy. It needs to be something that is quantifiable, that is measurable, that is objective. And so for us at Living Corporate, you notice that we don't really call ourselves a DEI company. We don't call ourselves a DEI podcast. We're an experiences management firm, right? So we drive employee engagement and customer trust for organizations. And we do that through our data analytics, through our brand storytelling, and through our e-learning platform. We're not really here for, nor do we believe that like DEI quote unquote forward content or even DEI quote unquote forward products and services is really sustainable. Because when you hear that language, you think fluff. You do. At best, at most generous, you think fluff. Oftentimes you think other things, right? But when we talk about data-driven insights, when we talk about brand storytelling to amplify organizations' voices, to amplify stories from organizations, to build trust in the market, and we talk about our e-learning platform that has over 1,000 modules on inclusive leadership and wellness and career management and navigation. Those are the things that we get excited about because we believe that those things extend beyond just quote unquote DEI, right? Doesn't mean that there aren't DEI application. There is DEI application if that's where you want to go. But there are organizations that do not have DEI, huge DEI offices or missions that work with Living Corporate. And we're really excited about having them as partners because they see us as an experiences management consulting partner for them and their goals. They see us as helping them build their customer experience insights, to build their employee experience insights, to help drive talent retention and brand awareness. And Living Corporate is not working with a lot of DEI teams. All that being said, the state of things, again, I do think the state of things are pretty rough. I believe that this season is pruning in a lot of different ways. I think that the HREX DEI space is going to get shrunk down even further. And I believe those who will survive are going to be those who are able to connect the dots from their work into actual revenue generated, revenue saved, risk averted, but again, like in tangible ways, not in these like theoretical ways, but ways that are obvious to executive leadership teams to say, okay, hey, this is obviously why we need to continue doing this work or doing these initiatives. Without that, these programs are going to continue to get cut, y'all. And I'm going to tell you, it's obvious that these leaders do not care about reputational damage and risk because they've either through they've done the calculus with their own ego, or maybe they've done the calculus some other way to say, hey, you know what? Yep, we might lose the stakeholder group, but we still got X, Y, and Z, and we're just going to continue to double down. We're going to continue to cut costs, and we're continue to be profitable, right? So, again, like this era of performative empathy just isn't there. And I also believe it's a mistake for those of us in these like strategic people spaces or operational roles to assume that organizations have shame. Companies do not have shame. Companies exist to make money, right? Like they don't care, right? Like it's copyright. So I would play them. They don't really care about us in the background, but they don't care about us. Like they care about making money, right? And so this work in this space is going to have to pivot for it to survive, right? I don't even really believe that DEI as a office will really be in like really popping position in the next 3 to 5 years. It's going to have to get subsumed into something else. But either way, we have to be honest about where we're at. And that doesn't mean the work stops, because irrespective of the framing, these employees that work at these organizations today still do expect to come to work and be treated with respect. They expect to have fair experiences. They expect to be supported in their career path. They expect to have opportunities to shine, to elevate. And that's going to have to be called something. Whether you call it DEI or you call it employee experience or you call it HR operations or you call it L&D, like whatever you decide to call it, that need is not going anywhere. So all that being said, for those who maybe missed our interview with Kamau Bell, I'm excited about y'all checking it out now. Next week, we're going to get back to regularly scheduled programming. Also expect like more spotlights on some of the work that we're doing with our clients. I've been telling y'all over and over again that Living Corporate is not just a podcast. Like we're actually this larger experiences management firm. But I also recognize that like that pivot has really only been about a year old, right? For most of y'all, if you're listening to Living Corporate, you know us as a podcast. So we're going to do a better job of really talking about the work we're doing as a company. And hopefully y'all will see this podcast as like an amplifier and a megaphone for all of who we are, and not just that we're a podcast or a podcast network. All right. We're going to get to this interview. I'll see y'all next week. W. Kamau Bell.
Hey.
Hey, man, I'm going to ask you a loaded question off top. How you doing, man?
I'm doing. I am highly favored. What's the expression?
Blessed and highly favored. Amen.
Yeah. So I'm. Yeah. So I'm doing. I could complain, but I know I'm doing better than most, and I am in a very privileged position in my career and ability to sit here and talk to you about all this. So I'm doing good.
You got the bars off top. All right, look. Now you've made a career of helping us laugh at the idiocy and absurdity of oppression while also dropping bars. This book, Do the Work, does that very well. I have a question for you is, how do you find the balance of making jokes about white supremacy while also not pointedly making the readers of the book, mostly white folks, feel like they're the butt of the joke? I mean, was that some of the parameters of what jokes made it and what maybe didn't?
Well, first of all, I co-wrote this book with a white lady, and she had no problem being the butt of the joke sometime. I think, the idea being that, like, you might get your feelings hurt, but shouldn't you have your feelings hurt about supporting white supremacy? Like, shouldn't you feel bad if you have unwillingly been a pawn in white supremacy, or if you've benefited from it, didn't realize it? So, I think the idea being that, like, we want people to do the work. So sometimes you take the scrub brush out to get people to go, you need to feel this. And then sometimes you go, we're going to be a little more gentle. But it's also about all the different ways in which we approach it. So, yeah, it's like you definitely want white folks to participate in anti-racist work. As you definitely want white folks, as my Pastor Michael McBride says, to stop reaching for whiteness to protect them. And so you want them to get into it.
Man, so, my background is in DEI consulting. And I remember the summer of George Floyd was murdered, black was in vogue, right? Like, white folks was painting roads with Black Lives Matter. Companies were making multi-million-dollar pledges and hiring a bunch of white DEI consultants and diversity and inclusion for those catching up. Every white woman was starting a book club, and they were baking their mac and cheese, man. It was a whole season. What do you think that we're still in that moment? And if not, can this book still thrive outside of that moment?
Well, so here's the thing. So when we were making the book, the publisher's like, I wish it could come out tomorrow because this is the moment of racism and it's all happening right now. And me and Kate, my co-author, were like, it'll be fine. And so, look, just right now on my phone, I saw that another one of the police officers who murdered George Floyd was convicted of federal charges for murder. He's gonna serve 30 months in jail for murdering this unarmed black man, George Floyd. So is that a victory? On some level, it's a victory, but also, just recently, there have been unarmed black folks who've been killed by cops. I'm thinking about Jalen Walker is one of the ones who was running away from the cops unarmed and killed by police officers. So that George Floyd moment, which led to all this quote unquote racial reckoning, has not stopped cops from killing unarmed black people. So I think the thing we need white people to learn is that don't just do the work when it seems cool. The work's got to be done every day. It's no different than exercising. If you exercise once a year, you ain't doing nothing. If you have to exercise regularly to get the benefit of that work. And it's the same thing with anti-racism. And I feel you got to put it in your Google Calendar. You got to actually make sure that you wake up and do it every day. The first page of the book is a poster that says "End White Supremacy," and we challenge you to put that somewhere up around your community so people know what you're all about. And again, black folks, we've been doing this work for a long time. I'm not saying black folks won't get something out of this book because there's a lot of history in here that ain't just about black folks. There's a lot of ways in which we encourage you to collect with your local community organizations that black folks should do too. But this really is aimed at those white folks who think, like as Jelani Cobb, my friend says, think buying Juneteenth ice cream from Walmart is doing the work.
They ain't doing the work, baby. So let me ask you actually a follow question to that. To your whole point around, like, man, the publisher was like, man, I wish we could drop this tomorrow. Now, come on, I'm not calling you old, right? But you turn 50 next year. All right?
Thanks. That's a nice way to say happy birthday.
Respect to you and love.
No, it's okay. I know as a black man, that's like 70 in white years.
Facts, though. I look at you and it's like, man, I'm looking like this mythical creature. It's incredible. My pop just cracks 50. So anyway, listen, man, there's a cyclical nature to all of this, right? In terms of, like, yeah, we think this moment of racial reckoning with George Floyd, but you remember the riots around Rodney King. Like, talk to me about, like, how different was that moment for George Floyd, and like honestly, the subsequent moments from the things that you've seen in the past? Like, what are the differences?
Okay, I'm gonna tell you. I'm gonna reach back into my old bag since you just outed me as being old, into my Gen X bag. You're welcome for all the pop culture you enjoy from us. By the way, you're welcome. Hip hop, you're welcome. So I would say this, that the thing that I remember about the uprising that happened after Rodney King, after those cops were found not guilty or innocent of those charges, was I was laying in bed not knowing what to do. There was no Twitter, there was no Instagram, there was no online, so I felt alone. I felt completely alone. Now, the moment something happens, like for example, when they overturned Roe versus Wade recently, I went immediately to Twitter and looked up Oakland on Twitter, Roe versus Wade, where are we at tonight? Like, what are we doing? Like, to go, how can we get out here and get in these streets? Now, if I can't go out into those streets, I know I can retweet those links and share those with other people. So the idea being that, like, you are much closer to being able to make an impact today than you could back in the day, as we say. Everything wasn't better back in the day. You're much closer to, for example, in the book we talk about doing the people who did the work, who are doing the work. And we talk about this black woman whose name is off the top of my head, who literally, young black woman, millennial, maybe even younger than that, who was like, the definition of racism in the dictionary is wrong. That definition is about prejudice. Racism is prejudice plus power. So she reached out to the dictionary and said, change the dictionary definition of racism, and they did. Now, that does not make peace dawn all over the world, but that's something that was impossible when I was that age, when I was young. You couldn't write to the dictionary. Like, how do you, there's no email, but I'm saying, so we have to understand there's levels to this, as we say.
100%, man. Look, there's a great section. First of all, there's a super bunch of great sections. In fact, there's a little color section where you color Nina Simone, and then there was like rays coming out the keyboard. Shit was fire, like super cold. But
all the art was done by Black, Indigenous, Latinx, AAPI art and other artists of color. All of it was designed by Black folks and artists of color.
I ain't trying to be funny. It was so creative. I knew a bunch of white folks didn't do it. It was beautiful. Now look, man, there's a great section though in this book that talks about leverage and privilege, which we all have relative amounts of. In the corporate DEI space, one word we don't use a lot of is power. The concept of having control and authority. Yet for real change to happen, power has to be redistributed to those on the margins. The way y'all
and you have to recognize.
Go ahead.
No, you got it. You have to recognize what your power is and how. And so I think a lot of people get caught up in like, I'm not Mark Zuckerberg or Elon Musk, so I don't have white privilege. And the fact is like, there's lots of ways. We joke. Can you yell at a police officer and get away with it? That's a level of power. Is a parking ticket just slightly annoying to you? That's a level of privilege. My daughter, who's 11, last night did the check your privilege section and was like, look how much privilege I have. She's an 11-year-old mixed race black girl living in Oakland, and she recognizes I have more privilege than I thought I had. So if she can do that, white people can do that. We can all do that.
So yeah, thank you. Because that's what I was going to ask was, do you see the leveraging of your privilege as interchangeable with sharing power?
I think it's a part of it. I think sometimes you have to step out of the way and give your spot to somebody else when you have the ability to do that, when it's not going to affect you in a negative way. And sometimes being in that position of power, you can keep the door open. So I recognize, for my example, for myself, having a TV show at CNN. The TV show started 7 years ago. Ever since then, every year, I have kept the door open to bring more black folks and other people of color through the door to work on my show in a way that if I wasn't doing that, I would still be surrounded by an all-white crew like I was in the first season. So I think there is a balance. There is getting out of the way, but there's also staying in that place you can keep the door open.
To that end, as a DEI practitioner, as someone who has this whole space, Living Corporate, we center and amplify black and brown folks at work. We're a black-owned bootstrap digital media network. I continue to question how real the work can be done in our hyper-capitalist corporate context. Do you think American capitalism is sustainably compatible with doing the work?
No.
Can you expect a little bit further?
I just thought I would just leave it at that. No, I think American capitalism is not in line with the values of doing the work, because we think that because of the way the capitalism is structured in this country, somehow we think if you make a lot of money in one area that you're smart across all areas, and then you have people going, this guy who's rich should run for president just because he's rich, and not and so the idea being that and we also, so American capitalism recreates oppression quite easily. So you have billionaires in this country where, if you look at through the way they made their money, a lot of their money was either made directly from slavery and the transatlantic slave trade. That was the beginnings of the corporation. It happens in insurance all the time. I just saw a TikTok video about that. Or you have somebody who owns a company that might be $1 trillion, but they aren't paying people all down the line an equitable and living wage. So you go, that person's a billionaire. Yeah, but as many people have said, you only get to $1 billion. To get to $1 billion, it is pretty likely that you have not paid people equitably along the way, if not 100% likely. I can't speak for Oprah. I'm not trying to indict every billionaire, although, but the idea being that, like, for the overwhelming majority of billionaires, they are not paying equitable wages to get to their $1 billion.
100%, man. Look, it's a lot going on right now. The world is on fire, metaphorically and literally. I'm in Texas, like literally 103 degrees outside. White folks still out here white folking. Again, you're gifted at finding humor and tragedy, and you're good at looking at a bunch of terrible shit in the eye and not blinking. Specifically last night, I saw this clip of you talking to this grand wizard at night with lights all around you, and I said, yo, is he about to, like, punch this dude? Like, what is happening? This is crazy.
People sometimes want me to punch those people. I just want to let them talk and expose themselves.
Brother, let me tell you something. I felt for you in that moment. Then he got real upset when you said you had that white wife. I saw him. Even behind that mask, his face curled up. He ain't like that.
Yep. He said that marrying a white woman was worse than murder.
Worse than murder. Come on. I said, huh? All right. So here's my question, though.
But let's be real. We know some black people feel that same way.
Hey, let's talk. Okay. All right, because I got a couple minutes left. I'm like, okay. What humor are you finding, though, in this season to not get too low?
It's funny. I don't find the humor because I don't think black folks, we don't find the humor. We use the humor to get through the pain. So I think that, like, that's just a survival mechanism. Nothing's funnier than hanging out with black folks talking about racism. You know what I mean? Like, we will have real talk. We will talk about the pain points. We'll talk about the things that make us angry. But the jokes will flow because that's how that's a way in which we deal with some of the pain. So I don't, for me, like, our first episode of United Shades of America this season was about wokeness and critical race theory. And there's a lot of laughter in that show because you have to laugh. You laugh to keep from crying or laugh to keep from throwing a chair through a window. And so for me, the idea being that, like, the jokes come naturally because it's a way to process the insanity.
Kamau Bell, it's been a pleasure. Consider you a friend of the show. Man, when you not even plugging the book, bro, come back, man. You're a hero, dog.
I'll come back. I saw that tweet about how excited you were to see me. So
just a little bit, dog. Just a little bit, bro. All right, man. God bless. We'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, brother.
Peace.
Living Corporate is a podcast by Living Corporate LLC. Our logo was designed by David Dawkins. Our theme music was produced by Ken Brown. Additional music production by Antoine Franklin for Musical Elevation. Post-production is handled by Jeremy Jackson. Got a topic suggestion? Email us at livingcorporatepodcast@gmail.com. You can find us online on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and living-corporate.com. Thanks for listening. Stay tuned.